What if I told you that despite the fact that the Super Mario Bros. Movie is going to make well over $1 billion, the so called NCU, or Nintendo Cinematic Universe, would be difficult, if not impossible, to make? And what if I also told you that while Mario is making money, Nintendo's other big franchise, The Legend of Zelda, could legitimately struggle to get a theatrical release? You'd call me foolish. You'd call me a heretic, a false prophet, and rightfully so. After all, who in their right mind would think that Nintendo wouldn't greenlight such easy money making ideas? A so called NCU would literally print money for the big end, so it'd be stupid to suggest otherwise. Yet, here I am, proposing this very idea to you. I assure you, I am in my right mind, and I have thought this through. What I am saying to you is that the problem isn't with Nintendo per se, but in the company they lease the movie rights to, Illumination. You see, Illumination is known through the animation community for three things. 1. Making films directed at children and family audiences. 2. Making marketable characters that sell very well. And 3. Making these films as cheaply as possible. Seriously though, the Super Mario Bros. Movie cost $100 million to make. In comparison, your average Disney animated film cost upwards of $150 million, or sometimes even $200 million, just depending on the scope of the project. Anyways, now this is a respectable goal. The problem lies with how they achieve it. You see, due to the fact that Illumination focuses on making films that are almost exclusively made for kids, narrative and story take a backseat. Case in point, the Mario movie. One of the biggest points of contention from the critics of this film was its lack of focus regarding the story. Narratively speaking, it wasn't exactly the strongest. I will admit, though, still a fun film. Personally, I don't think a Super Mario movie needs to be super heavy on narrative. I believe it just needs to be fun. But when it comes to other Nintendo franchises, you can't just rely on fun as being the selling point. In particular, when it comes to franchises like The Legend of Zelda or Metroid, you need a little more narrative structure than what I believe Illumination can currently offer. I could see Illumination doing future Mario sequels, obviously, but also spin offs like a DK movie or possibly even a Luigi's Mansion movie, even dipping their toes into other IPs such as doing a Kirby movie, a Yoshi movie, or possibly even a Splatoon movie in the future. Each of these franchises have a certain level of cartoony goofiness to them that Illumination would thrive off of. But the Legend of Zelda franchise and Metroid franchises? Not so much. Let's just say in a hypothetical universe, Nintendo announces tomorrow that a Metroid movie will be developed by Illumination. I would be the first to hit the streets with a picket sign, because as I stated earlier, Illumination tends to make movies that are goofy and fun and aimed at kids, whereas the Metroid franchise is a hardcore sci-fi thriller that takes itself incredibly seriously. That means no goofs, no dumb humor, and a narrative that's a little more complex than just rescuing a kidnapped princess. Essentially, something that's more adult orientated. And I believe Illumination cannot support such a task. And the same sentiment can be said about the Legend of Zelda franchise. While it does have its goofy elements, it is a more serious and adult-geared franchise, and it takes pride in being more serious than its plumber counterpart. So when it comes to making a Zelda movie, I don't want to see Link being a goof and Ganon being a simp for Zelda. I want to see something a little bit deeper, something with a more fleshed out world, with more intricate characters, and with an antagonist who is far more menacing than Bowser is, though I will concede that Jack Black Bowser is the best, hands down. Essentially, when it comes to Zelda, I want to see something more akin to the Lord of the Rings, and I'm sure most of you would agree when I say that Illumination isn't capable of doing something like that. I mean, maybe they can. Nintendo would just have to really tighten the leash on them, and I don't think that they'd be comfortable with that. Illumination would. And I think Nintendo knows this. I think they know the limitations that Universal and Illumination have. And while I do believe that they want a Legend of Zelda movie, both Nintendo and Zelda fans acknowledge that handing the keys to Illumination would be a fool's errand. So I think we can safely say that Nintendo won't allow Illumination near these IPs, at least if they're smart. That means if they have any hope to make the leap onto the big screen, it would have to be under another studio. Now, there was a story last year that Nintendo bought up an animation studio there in Japan, so it is possible that Nintendo could give Metroid and or Zelda to them, while leaving the rest of the properties to Universal and Illumination. Or, with Universal owning DreamWorks Animation, the studio responsible for Shrek, and who also recently refound their mojo with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Nintendo and Universal could give those properties to them to do them justice. But then that heralds in a new problem, and that problem becomes uniting them under one banner of the NCU. Whether it be with Nintendo's newly acquired studio or lending them to DreamWorks, we would have clashing creative visions between them and Illumination that would make a potential collaborative Smash Brothers film near impossible. And that's not factoring the legal headaches of borrowing these characters for such films. I mean, if you want the perfect example of this, just ask Marvel how that's working out for Spider-Man. Of course, this all hinges on if Nintendo withholds the Zelda and Metroid properties from Illumination. For all we know, they could have blindly given all their properties to them. And if that be the case, then God help us all. The problem at the end of the day would be the creative and legal problems that would withhold us from an NCU. But that's a problem for Nintendo to figure out. Because no matter how this whole NCU thing plays out, the Mario movie is poised to make $1 billion. So whatever may be, Nintendo is still winning. And that's my thoughts on this whole NCU thing. I don't see how it can be done, because as I said, the Metroid and Zelda franchises just don't fit that Illumination mold, and I feel like if they tried to squeeze it in, it would just be a massive failure. And I believe Nintendo is smart, and they acknowledge this. I just don't see it working out, because then they would have to send those franchises off to another studio, while Illumination handles the other ones. And if they want to make an NCU, eventually they would have to make a collaborative film, and that would be very difficult, legally speaking, to pull off. But I want to know what you guys have to think about this whole NCU possibility, and the possibility that we may or may not get it, depending on how Nintendo plays this out. Hit me up in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.